Welcome, everyone, to the RP Strength Podcast. We are back again. I am Nick Shaw, and with me is...
Lori Shaw. Hey, guys.
All right. Yeah, back again. Today, we're going to be talking about dieting myths. And to be honest, we have a guest with us, but he keeps insisting that he needs to be on the podcast. He basically reaches out to us and demands that he needs to come on the podcast. And again, this person, I'm just joking here. I can do that because it's him. Dr. Mike Israetel. What's up, Dr. Mike?
Nick, listen, thanks for returning my calls. I've been calling your secretary a lot, and I know I go to voicemail all the time, but it's just great to be back on.
Yeah, totally. It's been a little bit. We actually had on a lot of different guests, which has been cool to hear about all that. But the last podcast we did about myths was really popular. People really seemed to like it. So we want to get on, tackle some more myths. We've got some stuff written down, but before we get into that, what's new in your world, Dr. Mike?
It's the summertime. And it feels so nice. And also, today is the day before my birthday.
Oh,
wow.
Happy early birthday. I did know that.
Happy birthday.
Thanks. Yeah. I turned 36 tomorrow.
Nice.
And I feel no special way about it. Time is not something you can change. So, and
do you have any plans? Do you have any birthday plans?
Yeah, we're no big party because it's still lockdown season.
Yep.
Although that's actually lifting quite soon. We're just having a few people over, and I think I'm probably going to make people eat the pizza and wings and stuff from my favorite crappy pizza place around here that everyone hates.
Nice.
Because I love it, and I think it's hilarious that everyone else hates it. So it's probably going to be that.
It's your birthday. They can cry if they want to.
Exactly.
It's literally your party, and you can cry if you want to.
Other people should cry at my party. That's how I see it.
Let's talk about your party here for a second. So you're going to be having a party right in your house where you live, which in the middle of your living room is a giant lat pull down machine.
Correct.
What else?
Barbell, mini squat setup, and then an incline bench, convertible bench, a bunch of weights, and a pair of dumbbells, and a whole mess of bumper plates.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice. How's that going training at home? You're just like literally in your living room.
Yeah. So like, it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
I really miss the gym because, just training in the gym is better. The machines are better. The dumbbells, so we have the dumbbells that you
power block
put on
type things.
Yeah, that's worse than the power block.
Oh, okay.
You have to unscrew and screw them, and then sometimes they unscrew while you're using them, depending on what kind of movements you're doing. So it's really just, and they're just kind of unwieldy, and it's a variation. Like, we've had to get creative with variation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of being creative with variation. I want to go to the gym.
When are things lifting up in Philly?
So June 1st, we go into yellow phase or something where not much changes. Probably 2 weeks after that, unless something really wacky happens, is going to be green phase, 2 or 3. So I think right when I'm moving to Las Vegas away from Philly is when gyms open. So hopefully I'll get 1 or 2 workouts before we.
Got it. Where are you going to be training in Vegas? I know that's got a lot of good gyms.
Yeah, I think Jared and I are looking at a few gyms, but probably I think it's City Athletic Club or Las Vegas Athletic Club, one of the two. I think it's Las Vegas Athletic Club. They have a couple of locations, and one of them particularly has more machines than I've ever seen. And it's just, I've used their machines. I've been to that gym. It's actually very few hardcore people at all, interestingly enough. But it's just an amazing gym. And Vegas is unbelievable gym scene for bodybuilding. So we're excited to train probably at a few gyms. That's going to be super awesome.
I'm pretty sure Vegas is opening back up soon too. I'm pretty sure I saw something that all the casinos are opening in June.
No way. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so fascinating. I didn't know that the casinos were opening. I will say that the gyms are already open as far as I know in Vegas.
Got it.
So that's my kind of gambling with my life underneath a barbell.
Yes.
Yeah. Several hundred pounds, sometimes quarter of a ton, maybe.
Crystal and I were watching Law & Order Special Victims Unit, and there's a character on there. Of course, there's a character on there that has a gambling problem, and she went to Atlantic City and she was gambling. And I was just it was one of those things I couldn't relate to at all. I was like, you're giving away your money with a very good chance of losing it, better chance of losing than winning. And I was like, wow, nothing about, because like things that are fun but risky make sense. Like skydiving, it's really fun, but you could die. With gambling, it's like, it's giving away your money, but you might lose your money. And I'm like,
but it's the rush of winning. It's the rush of winning.
There we go. We got a gambling addict on our hands, Nick. Did you hear that?
I've been gambling one time in my entire life when I was maybe 18 or 19. This was in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. I went with one of my buddies from high school. We were in there about 30 minutes and I had lost probably, $30 to $50. And I was like, wow, this is the worst idea I've ever heard of. I'm playing, I'm not skilled. So, okay, if you're skilled at cards, okay, maybe I understand that. But I'm just like playing slot machines. And I was like, I could have just walked up to the owners and just like, hey, just take $50.
Yeah,
It's a donation to you.
I actually don't believe I've ever gambled a single time in my life, but I was with a friend in Las Vegas, and he laid down $100 on like red or black for the roulette wheel, and it went the other way. And it was $100 he took out of his pocket, crisp bill. He put it on this green table, and then they said some things, and they rolled the dice, and they said some more things, and then they simply just unceremoniously took his $100 away. And he turned to me and he was like, oh well. And I was like, like that hit my Judaism in a way I can't really describe. And I was like, why? This is crazy. It was like watching a kidnapping happen, where I was like, that belongs to me. That's something I own. Why are you taking it? And I never recovered. I'm never going to gamble ever in my life.
Is that the same individual that was betting heavily on sports as well at that time?
100%.
Yep. Okay. I know who you're talking about. All right. So we've got that out of the way. Got that covered. Thank you.
At least with sport, real quick. Sorry. At least with sports, you might have an insider understanding. Yeah. Like, there's a science to that. There's no science to roulette, folks.
50-50. All right. So time to get after it. Time to talk about some dieting myths. So we have a handful to talk about. I'm excited for this. Myth number 1. Let's get some input on this. It's best to lose weight all in one stretch. And so the example here is if you are someone that's particularly overweight, obese, you want to lose, let's say, 30, 50, 100 pounds, it's best to do it in one stretch. Yay or nay?
Yay. You just get it done. Just take it to the teeth.
Boom.
One battle, the whole war is over. So here's the thing. It seems like it would be a yay because it's so tempting.
Yep.
Like if you are pulling a Band-Aid off, do you do it all in one stretch or do you do it slowly and then pull half of it off, then walk around the rest of the day and pull the other half? Of course you do it all at the same time. So people have this idea that go ahead, Nick.
So quick note on that. I'm actually reading a book right now that talks about it's Predictably Irrational by, I think, Dan Ariely is his guy's name. And he actually talks about that exact analogy of ripping the Band-Aid off. And I think they did some studies or something like that actually shows if you go slow, it's actually a little bit better.
Oh, interesting.
And he had some really serious burns early on in his life, and he used to literally just dread because he would have to get his bandages changed all the time, and this was like all over his entire body. So you can just imagine the pure amount of dread that he had. Just looking forward to that, he would see the nurse walking in, and just basically start to panic. And he, I think he did some research himself, and he came back later and presented it to the nurses and was like, hey, actually, you might be better off ripping it off as fast as possible. And the nurses were like, okay, well, maybe, but the agony that the nurses had to go through in the time spent doing it, they were like, we're not going to do that because it's so painful for us having to watch and hear and listen to it all.
So they wanted to get rid of it as quick as possible. Yeah, it's very interesting. So on the same note, a lot of folks think okay, I have some weight to lose and I'm just going to just do it all. And that would work, except for two things are problematic. One, if you're trying to lose a lot of weight at the same time, your chances of success even getting to the end is a bad idea. Better analogy than the Band-Aid one in this case is like you've got your camping equipment with you, and it's a total hike of 30 miles to get to this waterfall where you're going to camp. Do you do it in one day or do you do it in two? Like you can try in one day, but 30 miles is a hell of a way to go in one day. And you might just find yourself in a place that's not great for camping, like 5 miles away from your location, and it's pitch black at midnight. And you got to set up a tent on the side of a rock with a rock poking into your butt when you're trying to sleep. Like it just was never an amount that you could have likely done. Like, yeah, if you really rushed it, right? then we get in, okay, let's say you really rush it. Let's say you have 50 pounds total to lose and you really rush it. You say, I got it all done. The biggest problem with weight loss is keeping the weight off, not getting to lose the weight. If you rush and go super fast, your body likes to rebound back, and it'll rebound really hard if you push it super hard. So then you get to this point where the analogy for the camping is you want to get to this beautiful waterfall and spend 2 days frolicking and camping and swimming in the waterfall and having these great views, but you walked the 30 miles so fast that you have blisters all over your feet. And all of a sudden, you can't even enjoy the waterfall because you can't get in the water, right? So then why did you go that fast? Just to go back and like end the trip and be like, how was your waterfall trip? Like, it sucked. I couldn't even enjoy it. So the idea is when you get to lose 50 pounds all at once, a lot of time you'll gain back all that weight and more. Or if it's not all that weight and more, you gain back a big fraction of it to where, like, let's say you go down 50 pounds and then up 20 pounds and then you're down net 30. Somebody clever could be like, why don't you just go down 30? You'd be like, if I knew that, well, then you should have. So there's why it's not a good idea.
What are the exact processes going on in the body that causes that?
I'm not sure. I don't know much about the body or stuff like that. So, you have a bunch of hormones that tell you how to, how much to eat. They regulate your hunger and your satiety and all this other behavior. Leptin and ghrelin and other hormones like that. And they just tend to keep going in the wrong direction the longer and harder you push them. There's a bunch of communication at the cellular level with fat stores. And if your fat cells get small enough, they start to complain more and more and more. There's tons and tons of stuff going on hormonally that basically the stuff is really, really thrown off. And more than hormonally, sometimes you can even lose muscle because you're dieting for a certain amount of time increases muscle loss risk towards the end. And then that's a problem because even if you do get to your weight loss goal, you've sacrificed some muscle mass. That's not really good cosmetically. It's not, or aesthetically rather, it's not very good for your health and your mobility and longevity and all this other stuff. So it just turns into a real disaster. And when those hormones are really thrown off, during the diet, the hunger and the lack of energy becomes so intense that you tend to have less of a chance of success, and you have to push incrementally harder. Like doing your first 5 miles of that walk really fast. If you want to walk the 3 miles, it's fine. If you can walk 5 miles fast, the last 5 miles with blisters forming already could take you forever and be a total disaster. So it's not just that, like, okay, I'll grind it and then I have this crap to deal with at the end. It's like the grind starts to escalate on you exponentially, that it gets harder to do, and that gets harder to do, and that gets harder because you carry all your fatigue with you.
It's like a negative feedback loop, basically.
Yeah, well, actually, in this case, I guess it could be a positive feedback loop where what's making you worse is making it worse, and that's making it worse, and that's making it worse.
So it's exponential. So it's exponential. Yeah, I meant
correct.
Negative feedback loop in the sense is basically trying to bring you back to homeostasis.
It is, yes, correct. And if you keep pushing, it's a positive feedback loop, which is real bad, right? So keep pushing, it's positive, and then the negative one gets stronger and bounces you back. Ideally, what you'd want is for it to be the other way around, that the longer you diet, the more accelerated ability you have. But that's just not true, right? It is true for a very short diet, but not for a very long one. So you end up in the situation where your probability of getting to the end of the diet is really bad, and your probability of rebounding is really not so great, or rather it's very high, which is bad. But maybe you just don't want to do that. And just kind of, I think folks might anticipate a question here is, how much weight is too much? Our general advice at RP, having read a lot of literature and coached a whole bunch of people, is a reasonable goal. Top end is 10% of your body weight in any one diet, followed by at least 2/3 as long spent in a maintenance phase or a muscle gain phase, and possibly up to 1 or 1.5 times as long for folks that have a lot of diet fatigue and a lot of perturbations of the hormones, experiencing lots of hunger, declines in activity levels, and so on and so forth. At least 2/3 of the time, possibly longer.
That's really important because if you're a 150-pound female starting off, that's 15 pounds, and 15 pounds doesn't sound like a lot because if you're comparing yourself to someone that's 250 pounds, they can lose 25. Again, it's not apples to apples. Again, it's all percentage body weight. So if you go by that, and 10% is a lot of weight. That's a lot of weight.
It's a lot of weight. Nick, I'm really glad you brought that up because I think a lot of the people that see transformation photos and read transformation stories and watch shows like Biggest Loser and stuff like that, those are people that tend to be like, potentially overweight, but not incredibly large. Let's say a female that weighs 175 pounds and wants to weigh under 150. And she thinks, oh, that's just 25 pounds. Like I saw a guy in The Biggest Loser watch like 50 pounds. Oh, he lost 50 pounds in a month. Oh, it's easy for me to lose 25 pounds in 3 months. We're like, no. That's way too much. Not a good idea. And the thing is like, if you start off with a moderate amount of loss and you succeed, then very, very good things happen. You've lost all that weight. You pat yourself on the back. You're not ballooning back up, and you can always do more. If you start, burn out, fail, and retrogress, all you have to pin on your belt is a failure. Like it's like going to the all-you-can-eat buffet. If you take a bit on your plate, you can always go for seconds and thirds and fourths. But if you take too much, you're just wasting food. So it's better to shoot for a slightly less ambitious goal rather than shooting for an overly ambitious goal.
For sure. What's the most amount of weight that you've lost in any one dieting phase?
I can't actually remember. Let's see. One dieting phase I must have lost. I went from 275.
You're 5'6", by the way.
5'6", 275 to 235. So that must have been 40 pounds.
Yeah.
And I lost 40 pounds in a matter of probably about 6 or 7 months. Pretty continuous dieting. In my sort of like, that's not as impressive as it sounds, for me to get to 275 took heaven and earth. And dropping down from 275 is just a matter of eating more, like not stuffing yourself every meal. And I'm just losing like 2 pounds a week just eating regular. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but it's been probably 10 years since I've lost any more than about 8% on a diet.
You were so far removed from your homeostasis as to what you're meant to be at 5'6" that it had to have been pretty easy. Lori, what about you? What's the most weight you've done?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you probably know my numbers better than me. I don't really remember.
Well, so the first time you dieted down to compete, you got down to like 113. So you probably started from what? 130, 135 maybe?
Yeah, probably something like 135.
Which is
20 pounds.
I mean, yeah, and at that body weight, that's over 10%. So again, like that's for like a hardcore.
And that was a competition diet. Yep. So not. Yeah.
And those diets, like, you only get to be successful as a hardcore bodybuilder on a diet if you've jumped through the hoops of already doing tons of normal diets and already being super passionate. And it's a competitive scenario. You have a coach. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might be successful, but it's like saying, what's a reasonable distance to run? And someone's like, marathon. You're like, I'll just start my first training run of a marathon. Like that's not, people say, oh, Lori lost 20 pounds. That should be fine. I weigh 115. I'll be like 195 or just be 95 pounds. And it's like, well, gee, Liz, she did that after years of dedication and, she's passionate for the sport. That's not something you just do on your first try. And that's the thing is that's very related. Same myth is like, that's the thing is losing all the weight at once almost always means losing all your weight on the first try. Because, people have this idea. They're like, I weigh 250 pounds. This chart from the insurance agency says I should weigh 160 for best health. And boy, would I look great in my high school dresses again. And they go, let me just get rid of all of it.
90 pounds. All right.
Yeah. Something that I'm sure other people have said, but my one of my coaches, Broderick, says is it didn't take you, a few months to gain this weight. It's not going to take you a few months to lose this weight. Mm-hmm. It took you 10 years, then it sure shouldn't take you 10 years to lose it, but it's not going to take you, 3 months. That's nonsense.
That's the same advice I always hear for after having a baby to lose the weight. Like you gained it over 9 months. Mm-hmm. You should give yourself a little bit more time to lose than people always want to lose it immediately.
They just like literally the next week they want to be back and like, wow, I'm not pregnant anymore. We're done, right? It's like not exactly right.
Yeah.
And you got to factor in potential nursing effects too, which is going to slow down the effects of losing weight even more. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure, over the course of about 5 or 6 months, actually a little over 5 months, I went from about 250 to 210. Again, that was for a competition, though. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was you and I suffered really greatly with the diet after effects from that.
That was what I would call miserable dieting, insufferable. So one other thing, and again, this ties into the second part of the myth that you had talked about, in that you have to do it all on the first try. Well, so it's almost the very first diet you run. So I'm talking about someone that's never really kind of dieted like RP style, so like scientific, very organized. Sometimes it's a little easier to lose weight because you've never done it, quote unquote, the right way. And so sometimes you see some of those beginner effects. And what I see a lot in the Facebook group is people will compare their second or third cuts RP style. So they've been doing it for a year and a half. And they're like, whoa, I can't lose as much weight as I did the first time. Well, I always like to tell people, well, of course you're going to lose more the very first time. There's lower hanging fruit there. Like you can knock that off easily. That's all relative, of course. But again, as you start to lose more and more, it's like you're talking about, those feedback loops kick in, and it's harder to keep losing at that same rate. So again, like people used the templates before, and now they're using the app, and they're like, oh, well, I can't lose as much weight with the app. The templates must be better. That's not the case. You're not comparing apples to apples. Now you're comparing apples to, oranges.
Wow, that was the fruit you came up with, Nick. That was so creative.
I was going to say like TVs or something, because there's a TV over there that I'm looking at here.
Hey, that would have been apt. Yeah, totally. So I actually just did a podcast earlier today with a gentleman from Germany, and we talked about this, and he asked, do diets get easier or harder? And I said that dieting to the same body fat percentage gets easier the more times you do it, to the point where you don't even need to diet to be there. You're just there anywhere. But the big mistake people make when they think dieting gets harder is they keep trying to get leaner. Mm-hmm. So even your great bodybuilding coach, John Meadows, told me that towards the end of his bodybuilding career, it got so easy for him to get in contest shape. He only needed like 8 weeks of contest dieting, and that was it. He was in shape. And because he had done it so much and been to that exact same super ultra low body fat so many times, even that was easy for him. Mm. But if you've dieted down to, let's say if you're a woman and you've dieted, if your first diet started at 33% body fat, you got to 25, you're like, this is a big deal. And it was tough, but not so tough. Your next diet, 25 to 20%, is actually less total percent. But to get to 20, that's an all-time new low, way different than 25. And all of a sudden you're like, man, that diet was no easier, and I didn't lose as much weight. And then the next diet's the one you go on the RP clients group and say, oh, geez, it was a disaster because I dieted from 22% down to 18%, which is 1% less than I lost on my last diet. But it took like 6 weeks longer, and it was miserable the whole time. It's like, yeah, that's true, but now you're 18% fat. That's the very low end of the range for females. And you are like, oh, you're a cyborg, you're kicking butt, and people are asking you if you're a professional fitness model. And you're like, right. Well, did you think it was going to be easier to diet to that? Like, well, no, I guess it wasn't, because you keep extending your goals. So that's something to keep in mind too, that as your goals get tougher, the diet's going to get tougher. But as long as your goals stay the same, diets get easier over and over. And that's how maintenance works.
I can second John Meadows there, because I remember it took a lot of just suffering the first time that I really got into like contest shape in 2012, 2013. So the good news for me was then I was starting from a lower body fat percentage. And so, for example, I had to crush cardio to get down to, let's call it 6 or 7% body fat. Well, then the second time that I did it, instead of starting from, 20% body fat, I was starting from, 14%, and to get back down to 7, 6, 7, 8 or whatever. I mean, I don't even think I did cardio. It's like, it wasn't that big of a deal. Lori, do you remember that from when you did it too?
Everybody hates you when you say you don't have to do cardio, by the way. I know I do.
Okay.
I don't. Which diet are you talking about?
So I just mean in general, like when you competed, various competition ones when you did, like, did you find that it got easier or harder for you?
I mean, I was never very good at maintenance or massing. So I think if I had done like you said and, kept everything to a lower percentage and stuff like that, but I don't think I was very successful at that. So I feel like I was always starting from, a bigger deficit or excess than I should have been, I guess.
Yeah, you got leaner as each one went too. So, I mean, it would make sense to be a little bit harder, because I think you kept getting, in better condition, leaner and leaner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that kind of makes sense. Is the more and more you do it, and again, but if you keep pushing that envelope, it is going to be a little bit harder. If you keep going back to the same spot, it's not that bad. So I think that kind of wraps up the first myth, that you got to do it all in one stretch. So
I just want to say one thing on that, because I see it a lot. I see people saying, especially if they have done a lot of fad diets and not had success before, and then they find RP and the scale is going in the direction that they want, I see a lot of times people like don't want to stop, like we were saying, like they don't want to stop for maintenance. They don't want to, pause. They want to like ride that momentum. Like it's working. Why would I stop? So, I mean, I see that a lot with people.
I think there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's riding momentum and not pushing the momentum.
Okay.
Like if they're easy street, losing tons of weight, great. But there's a point at which they switch to like, I'm really suffering, but I still want to get to this new goal I set, which is 20 pounds lower. That is not a good idea. So look, if you get down to 140 from 155, you're just breezing through, keep going. But as soon as the diet starts to push back on you, if you've objectively accomplished your goal already, and you're just going for extra credit, now's the time to stop.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So what would you say is a max time to diet? Because I want to say in the app, it's set up to be like 14, 16 weeks?
Max time to diet, Nick, is actually one of our other myths, I think.
So yeah, I
number
guess
3.
That's tied into number 3. The longer I go, the better off I'll be.
These are all kind of related.
Sure.
So we can just get to that one if you want.
Let's do it.
So, and we can come back to the faster diet. So the longest diet that's pre-programmable into the RP Diet app is, I believe, 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. But if you, during the app, the AI can ask you if you'd like to delay the diet changing by a week and altering your goals. And that can extend your diet up to as long as 16 weeks if you so choose. But the longest you can plan to diet is 12, and it potentially can extend up to 16 if need be to meet your original goal. So the 16 weeks doesn't mean you get a more aggressive goal. It actually makes the diet longer, but makes it easier at the same time. Per any week, the deficit is lower. So those are the constraints there.
4 months is a really long time to be dieting too. You have to consider the psychological impact of it because dieting's not that much fun. And so again, month 1, not so bad. Month 2, okay, bearable. Month 3, pretty dang hard. Month 4, now that's getting legit. That's going to be real tough.
Mm-hmm.
So can I talk about some of the research, Nick?
No, Mike, this is an evidence-based podcast, so we don't want to talk about the research.
No research.
I don't mean, sorry, I said that wrong. Not the research, our research.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, and this is an article that's going to be published very soon, possibly already published by the time you guys get to hear this podcast.
Yep.
But we've been doing data collection through RP Diet app because we have tens of thousands of users at any one time. And we've collected some very good data on a variety of metrics. And one of them is, what is the diet length that corresponds to the best success rate? And let me throw a little science and math at you guys. We actually calculated success rate in a very, very cool way. It wasn't total amount of weight lost, because sort of no-brainer, that's like the longer the diet, the more weight you lose, generally. And it wasn't like how close you got to your goal or what the chances were that you got to your goal. Like, because if you set really short diets with really easy goals, it's obviously just biasing into the other direction. So we actually multiplied those two. We took the total percent of weight someone lost, multiplied it by the chance they actually would lose it. Because with a very long diet, you stand to potentially lose a lot of weight, but most of the people that try to get to that goal with you are going to fall off, right? It's like, some kind of military operation has a really huge payoff, but most of the drones get shot down on the way in. Thus, you actually have to calculate, okay, what are the chances of any drones left to strike this target, right? And it could be that even though this operation has a big payoff, the chances of reaching it are so low, it's just not the best idea. And other less ambitious things are a bigger payoff. So we calculated that out, and it turned out that from over 10,000 user data points, which is really, really kind of a lot of data, we saw a very clear trend where the most success is experienced by folks dieting roughly around 6 weeks in length.
No way.
And isn't that crazy, Lori?
Well, so I know a little bit of this already because we've talked, but just wait for the end when there's like this other separate group that's
all right.
Going to be the Lori Shaw, Shaw group.
Yes, that's right. So, and then you see less success going from 6 to 8 to 10. And our final analysis was on 12-week dieters. And 12-week dieters, if you look at the data in a simple way, they actually beat 6-week dieters. So 11 weeks, not great. Okay, it's too long of a diet to have great success. Another way to see that is if you look at the numbers independently of how many people fall off, most people who ever start an 11-week diet just quit at some point and just never reach their goal. So the 12-weekers actually are more successful than almost everyone else. And you think, how? But it turns out there's a small amount of folks that diet for 12 weeks at the most possible aggressive rate that you can on the diet, which is 1% per week. And they're just machines. And we actually looked at them as an independent statistical sample and tried to figure out how they're different from everybody else. And we found some cool stuff we'll share with people. But we call them the super dieters. And that's actually the super dieters, because there's another group of super dieters that behave a little differently. But these folks tend to just blow it out. The thing is, if you exclude them from the sample, because there's just very few of them, but they're so successful, they skew the whole sample. Most people are not better off betting that they're one of those people. They're better off betting that they're probably not one of those people.
They're the outliers, yeah. And you have to ask the question, people are inherently, what's the name for that bias? Maybe it's a self-serving bias. No, I don't know if that's right, but you think that you are a lot better than you probably actually are.
Totally.
Sure. Everyone thinks that. So
everyone's above average in intelligence, right? So that ends up being the whole situation there, where basically, like, now we can't draw a strict causation because it's not an experiment, it's just correlations. But correlations can be powerful statements about reality that if you choose to ignore or choose to go against, you're making an interesting choice, potentially a correct one, but certainly an interesting one. And the way we can phrase it correlationally, which is to say accurately, is to say, out of 10,000 people, the people that get the most success on diets diet for shorter lengths of time. The other way to interpret that as a piece of advice, if you're going to believe that the correlation is causative, is to say, look, if you want the best chances of success, maybe don't diet for too long. And it's not just like we compared 6 weeks and 12 weeks only. It's every single step, every added week just has people falling off the wagon more and more and more. And that's really just the thing. And I know, like, when you get the RP Diet app or you start any other kind of diet, that losing all the weight at once thing is what ends up fueling most of that selection of the 12 weeks, because it gives you the option to go anywhere from, the menu's actually a little bit advanced. You sort of tell the app how much weight you want to lose, and then it gives you a duration, or you tell it a duration first, and it gives you weight. But fundamentally, people look at this span and be like, well, I could lose for 3 weeks, and I could lose for 12. And I think a lot of people get confused their ambitions versus realities, or wishes versus facts. And they go, yeah, 12, let's just do it for 12. And it's like, it's not that you're just selecting results. You're selecting a journey, which can be perilous. And it's probably not the best to select the journey that's the most perilous. It's almost like, look through this Indiana Jones map and there's like, well, here's the killer monkeys, here's the killer croc pond, here's the magic wand that'll kill you. But at the end, there's like the most treasure. Let's just go get the most treasure. And it's like, are you sure you're ready to fight all the killer monkeys? It's like, whatever. Well, you might want to consider, like, are we really ready for the killer monkeys? Are you really ready for dieting 12 weeks? And the answer for most folks is maybe. And why don't you just do 6 weeks first and see how you feel? And if you really knock that out of the park, try an 8-week diet. And if you really just knock that completely out of the park, try a 10-week diet. And then by then you'll have lost all the weight you want anyway, right? So unless you've done this before, you're super hardcore, so on and so forth, go for 12 weeks. But this comes with a huge grain of salt of, look, if I was a gambling guy, back to the casino, right? I wouldn't bet on you. I really wouldn't. And I wouldn't bet on myself. So dieting for shorter durations from in the 6 to 12 week range is usually best. And that actually, I think, dovetails pretty well into the how quickly should I lose weight per week discussion, if you guys want, because that's another myth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So real quick on that, people set goals not in the mindset of realizing how hard things are. Right. So quick example. So I just did Murph not too long ago. And in my head, I was like, I can probably do that in like 45 minutes. And then I started like training for it and sort of timing myself in some splits. And I quickly realized, I was like, oh my God, that's going to be really hard. Mm-hmm. And I started to kind of back off my goals a little bit because I was setting goals in the state where I thought, oh, that's not going to be that bad. Mm-hmm. And that's what people do. And then they don't realize how hard, how just miserable Murph is. And you're on round like 11 and you've got 20 rounds to go. And you're just like, why did I do this? Why did I do this? But now I'm getting a little bit off track, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that right now.
Yeah. It's just better to go a little bit easier, have some success, and then you can always make it harder later. And so, super related, myth number 3, I guess, is the idea of how much weight should I lose per week? In other words, how fast should I diet? How rapidly should I lose the weight per week? And there's an idea that like, the more you choose, the better. We had a real with the RP Diet app. We had a real problem with when we first released the app, where it just sort of gave you options and it took your word for it. Now the app warns you if you go over certain weights of weight loss, which are perfectly healthy and perfectly fine. It's just not for everyone. The app now warns you and says, "Hey, this is very aggressive. Like, proceed at your own risk, and here's some more information about how maybe you could do this or not." But it used to not say that, right? You remember, Nick? It would just like, just choose your own adventure. And a lot of people chose the fastest rate we offer, which is 1% body weight per week. Again, it's perfectly safe, perfectly healthy. Boy, oh boy, is it tough, especially for a very long diet. And a lot of folks who burn out, and before they burn out, they would say, like, I can't believe the app is taking away so much food. Well, if you want to lose 1% of weight per week, you're just not going to be eating a whole lot. That's just what it ends up being. So, and it's obvious. Like, it's kind of like, no duh, you want to lose as much weight as possible per week because that loses you most weight / gets the diet over with faster. It's all the best possible things. But it's not a question of should you click on this. It's a question of, have you dieted before? Do you know what you're getting yourself into? And can you do the work? It's not, how many people apply for an advanced computer programming job that is, pays you $250,000 a year and apply for this job thinking, okay, let's do it. I want 250. And then someone's like, what computer languages do you know? You're like, English? Like, that's not a computer language. You're like, I learned some Spanish in high school. So it turns out you don't know anything about computer programming, but the only way you make the 250K is to know and work. And it's even hard for computer programmers to do this stuff. Like, you have to have a high degree skill set and you have to work. So it's not just a matter of selecting $250,000 a year. It's, do you have the requisite backbone, and do you have the requisite know-how and the requisite experience to actually do what you're supposed to do? So you're not selecting a destination, you're selecting a journey, and the journey's on you. And it's tough. And again, the 10,000 sample research we did with the RP Diet app, very, very interesting. It shows that for folks dieting roughly 6 to 8 weeks in length, pretty close to that top end figure of roughly 0.8% body weight per week is a good rate of loss, pretty close to the aggressive end. And then as you diet for longer, folks that diet for longer, the best successes of the longer diets, of the most successful 11-week dieters, the best success was in the 0.5 range of percent body weight per week. So if someone weighed 200 pounds at the start of their diet, they would only be losing roughly a pound a week on that kind of plan, versus if they only dieted for 6 weeks, they may be losing up to 2 pounds per week. So it turns out that and this is kind of a no-brainer, the longer you diet on average, the less aggressively dieting is a very, very good idea.
That seems to be something that would make a lot of sense. So it's almost like the mini cut ebook, right? That you and Jared wrote. So if you're going to go a little bit shorter, it's okay to punch the gas pedal a little bit harder. But if you're going on a long road trip, you're not slamming on the gas the whole time. You're going to sort of cruise. So that's probably a good analogy to think about your dieting length and the percentage that you want to lose per week.
Yeah, we're actually saying something even a little bit more interesting than that. It is that if you are dieting for a short time, you're actually better off going a little bit more aggressively, because then you get these really quick results and it really motivates the crap out of you and you're likely to stick through it. The thing is, people who diet very short amount of time, let's say 4 to 6 weeks, but lose very little weight per week, at the end of it, they're like, they have one meal of Chinese food, they eat a bunch of salt, they bloat back up to their old weight, even though they haven't regained all the tissue. It's only 3 pounds that they lost. They're like, I'm heavier than before I started. This is so stupid. Mm-hmm. And they tend to get demotivated. With folks that are dieting for a short time, 6 weeks, it's better that they go a little faster because it's really not that big of a deal. The body can handle it just fine. But the problem is combining those two negative strategies. So there's a couple negative combinations. One is, don't diet at a very slow pace for a very short time, because you just accomplish almost nothing and you'll get demotivated.
Might as well be.
But also, exactly, don't diet for at a very aggressive pace for a long time, unless you're a super dieter, and this means you've done it before a whole bunch, and or you just got that magic touch. And some people do, but I wouldn't bet on it in my first diet. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, the more experienced you are, probably going to be more likely that you are one of these quote unquote super dieters. So now we got to be careful that we just coined that term, the super dieter, which is
Sure.
pretty cool. I'd like to maybe think
Sure.
I was a super dieter back in the day. Now I'm not so confident that I would be, but
You're like a retired Superman. Your joints hurt a little bit. Who knows what's going on.
well, unless I plan on stepping on stage again, I don't think I need to be in that super dieting mode. So I'm okay with that.
100%.
But yeah, no, that's great, man. And that's really cool. I can't wait for that article to come out because, it's going to be, I think it's going to open up a lot of people's eyes. It's just like, what's the most successful route to go when it comes to dieting? And I got to be honest, when you shared some of the results with me, I was like, oh, wow, that's a little surprising that it was.
Oh yeah.
More of like hey, you want to start on the shorter end. And I was like, oh, wow, I would almost certainly have not thought that. And then it made a lot more sense when we heard about the super dieters. Like, okay, well, now we got the people that are going 12 weeks. And a lot of people sort of mistakenly think that we recommend you got to do 12 weeks. And that's not the case. It's just
the biggest option. If you sell people food at restaurants, a lot of times they pick the biggest option, even though that's not really what they can finish realistically. Just the same way here, a lot of folks click on the most because they want the most. Because here's the thing, and this is, I'm going to get a little bit, I don't want to say negative, but maybe cold or realistic to channel the wisdom of Thomas Sowell applied from economics to dieting. Folks that think I'm going to be the one that loses 50 pounds on my first go and get no rebound and no problem, I'll just fix my life altogether with one short 4-month diet. To paraphrase Thomas Sowell in a different context, do you think you're among the first 1 million people to thought that and thought it was a unique thought? Like, you're not. Everyone wants to do this. It's similar to females that are like, listen, I want to start training with weights, but I don't want to get too big. Like, wow, a lot of females accidentally turn pro in bodybuilding. And they're like, really? Like, no, you're going to have to fight and scratch for every single bit of muscle mass that you're ever going to gain. And it's like, okay. So I think a lot of times people will, they'll sort of have this grab and go mentality for things, which is honestly, so I think it's, people probably always been like this. It's a little more easy to be like this nowadays, I think, because of the great culture that's developed around apps and advanced digital and real world marketplaces in all the rest of our lives, incrementally more and more. We can just click on things and they happen. I mean, like, look, if you want an Amazon anything, you just click and it shows up. You want Spotify music, you click on any song, it shows up. Like, if Spotify doesn't have a song, people get violent. Like, what? This is nonsense. What a disaster of an app. They don't know anything about the back end of getting legal permission to get all these songs and so on and so forth, and how tough it is to upload a bunch of this music. So we have this situation where we're really used to just getting everything we want. And because the RP Diet app is an app, you're like, oh, it's an app. I can lose as much weight as I want. Click 12 weeks and 1%, and it should happen. And then all of a sudden the app's like, yeah, so you're actually going to have to do all this work. And you're like, interesting. Well, if it offered this option, it's got to be a really good option, and I should be able to do it. And then all of a sudden, not so much. So it's one of those things where you got to have some reverence for the process. Dieting is on you. And there's no need to rush in. Take it easy first, see how it goes, and then see if you can go from there.
It's never a bad idea to start with maintenance. And again, just to get used to the app too. If you're using it for the first time, hop in, choose maintenance for a month. Get used to it, play around with it a little bit, test out some different stuff. And then again, you get a good baseline established. Maybe if you are one of these people that's been, chronically dieting or dieting for a long time, you're going to actually get yourself better long-term results by taking it easy for a little bit, laying off the gas, and then getting into it.
Yep.
So that kind of covers up the first three. They sort of all tie together. So now we have another myth. And again, we work with a lot of athletes, so this one's a little bit more geared towards the athletic population. But this one is weight loss is the only thing that matters when it comes to, dieting and performance in sports. It's always better to be lighter and to be leaner.
And people think that this is the case about health. They think it's the case about aesthetics as well. I look better when I'm less weight. I'll be a better athlete when I'm less weight, and I'll be healthier when I'm less weight. And those things are conditional statements that may or may not be true, and they're often not true. So if you're coming from the perspective of you're morbidly obese, all three of those things are true every single time that you diet for quite a long time. Will you be healthier at a lower body weight? Yes. Will you be aesthetically more pleasing to no one but yourself? Yes, probably. And then will you be better at sports? With a few exceptions, absolutely. But for many people, they reach the point where I think the first thing that happens is sport is one of the first ones to fall, where you've got a power lifter that is supposed to be massive and moving heavy weight. And they go, you know what, if I got leaner and I lost even more weight, then I'd be better at powerlifting. And it turns out that at some point, that's just not even true, because you'll have to lose muscle or leverage or energy that would come and give your lifts and training fuel. You have to take away to get skinnier for some reason. All of a sudden, that one statement is just not true anymore for you. Like, the diet AI would be like, well, actually, yes, it would make you look potentially better if you like looking a bit skinnier or smaller, but it definitely won't make you better at powerlifting. And that's, I've been a coach for a while. I used to be anyway. And a lot of lifters will be like, so I should move down a class, right? I'm like, no, it's going to make you worse. And they're like, but I thought everyone's just permanently moving down a class. Like, no, that's just the people that post on Instagram and the people that you choose to follow and choose to be interested in, because you have your own sort of inborn obsession with getting smaller, which is probably something that needs to be tackled by itself, right? Because a lot of people use justification. Like, they just want to get smaller, like for their own reasons, some of them not so great. And they'll be like, oh, it'll make me a better powerlifter too. Like, no, it sure won't. So there reaches a time when at least the sport performance one doesn't work. And then the other ones I can talk about separately with you sort of.
Yeah, well, that same thought process applies a lot to CrossFit as well, because, if you look at the top males, top females, they're all quite lean, but there's a point at which it doesn't make sense to get any leaner, because then you're just risking those performance goals. So I used to always tell people that, when it comes to strength sports, that number, that body fat percentage number for males is probably like 9-10% body fat on the very low end. If you're above that, okay, you can probably get a little bit leaner, because you're trying to maximize how much muscle, how much lean tissue you can have in a given weight class. So that tends to be a pretty good trade-off. You start going lower than that, well, shoot, now you're starting to get into like bodybuilding stage level, and that's probably not going to be a good thing for your strength levels.
100%. So there's a lot of situations in which in sports, it's just no longer a good idea to keep going lower. And then what about health? Well, health, one of the interesting things is that there's an incredibly broad range of body weights at any given height that are very, very healthy, and they really can't tell apart. And people always think like the middle value is what you want to shoot for, like with females that are roughly, I would say, like, 5'4", being like 120 pounds means you're in very good health. But you could also be in very good health at 90 pounds at 5'4", especially depending on your frame and if you got there in a safe way, or if you're just genetically a skinny person. If you're 90 pounds and 5'4" as a female, you could be in absolutely great health. And if you are 150 pounds and 5'4", and 116, even 170, depending on how much muscle mass you're carrying, you can be in excellent health, the best health. You can take a 170-pound woman at 5'4", make her lose 15 pounds, and she's in no way going to get healthier. So people think like, okay, well, the average here of healthy weight is 120 pounds, let's say. That's what I need to be. And that's just not true. The range is incredibly large. At some point, if you say, okay, well, I lose weight, I'll be healthier, a doctor could look at your chart and be like, I wouldn't really bet on it. Imagine, people think that weight loss is the sort of the panacea that cures all diseases. Well, if you're over fat, absolutely. But if you're no longer over fat, it just doesn't really do much. Like if someone comes to me and, they let's say they're female and they weigh 130 pounds and they're 5'4", and they're like, hey doc, I want to improve my health. What do I do? I wouldn't be like, you should lose weight. I'd be like, oh, like, how is your food? Are you eating healthy foods? Are you getting lots of physical activity? Have you done your blood work to make sure you're not sick? Like, those would be my 3 questions. Absolutely. Because everything else is like, well, look you up and down. Like, you're clearly not over fat, and there's no reason to think that your body weight has anything to do with your health at this point. We've forgotten that there are such big ranges because so much of America is way to the north of that range that we all would just assume that, well, always smaller is better. And a lot of times that ties into aesthetic goals, which is a little bit more of a nuanced discussion, I think. I suppose we're going there anyway because it's a myth, but it's which I'll just start it off.
I was gonna say you're already trending there, man. Just do
sure.
It. Just
well, so people oftentimes don't sort of introspect into exactly what sort of question are they asking themselves, or what answer they're looking for when they suspect that they'll look better when they're of lighter body weight. And then it gets into this relatively politically incorrect, although not in any very grotesquely offensive way, situation where you start to examine, okay, so what do you mean by look better? Right. And all of a sudden you think like it's a very well defined term, but it's not. Does that mean you're more sexually attractive to the people that you want to sexually attract? And a lot of times people are even uncomfortable admitting that, right? So they'd be like, well, no, it's for me. I don't care about them. Half the time they're like, it really is for them. They just don't want to admit it. And when they do admit it, you can ask them this, like, so have you polled the people that are sexually attracted to you potentially and asked them? Like, I've talked to a few girls that I had a ton of respect for in my life and asked them, like, for me to be as hot as possible, what body weight would I be? And this was already when I was 220 plus. They were like, I don't know, like 160 to 180. And I'm like, I knew that, because I clearly did not get this jacked for any girls. Like, it was just a pure egotistical mind trip. Like, I knew from the get-go, right? But imagine if I was losing weight under the suspicion that people will find me more attractive, and everyone who's looked at you in a way that was like, ooh, she's kind of hot or he's kind of hot, they're like, if you gain 10 pounds, you'd look perfect. Like, how do you know? You've never perhaps even asked. And then when people say I'm doing it for myself, that's an even deeper labyrinth to get into. And it's so worth getting into before you make the decision to try to get skinnier, because you can ask yourself, like, where did yourself get these ideas? There are some genetic tendencies in humans to always want to be smaller that are very stupid genetic tendencies. Like, some people have genetic tendencies to get into high risk situations. You got to be an adult and not do that. So if you have genetic tendencies to just always want to be skinnier, that's a dangerous road that's going to cause your life a lot of suffering, even if you don't eventually get too skinny to be of proper health, right? And then some people, it's a sociocultural milieu. You've read enough Cosmo magazines or something to where you think the ideal look is somebody who weighs like 90 pounds at 6'1" or something, like Photoshop only.
Like that.
And that's not a sustainable look.
If you took the actual Barbie doll and like made it into proportion.
Totally. She'd be like a non-functional human with not enough space for organs, right? And it'd be like, you're missing 8 ribs. I don't know how that works. But like, so that's a thing. And then some people come from family structures or from friendship structures that maybe they're all for the best meant, but they're sort of toxic, and this is such a cross-cultural universal that it's not even one culture. How many grandmas tell their granddaughters various little snippets of lose weight or be skinny? Like, I'm aware of no culture on this earth in which grandma's not like, oh, Stacy, you're looking a little thick, maybe. Like, that's what grandmas in Russia do, I'll tell you that. And they'll tell it to other granddaughters that aren't even related to them. Like, that's just a thing. And it's a thing that grandmas do to their daughters, that do to their daughters, and grandma does it to their grand. And it's this culture of just sort of toxicity. And there was a quote we learned in college, which is supposed to be like a quote that was wrong on both counts. It's clearly only wrong on one. It was this like some countess or something said, you can never be too rich or too thin. And like, you absolutely can never be too rich. That is absolutely the most objective statement you can ever make. There's no such thing as too rich. That's actually true. But no, you can never be too thin is like a completely absurd statement. You can die from being too thin.
Yeah.
And before you die, your life is awful because all of your life is involved in dieting, restricting any pleasure and having nutrient deficiencies and having low energy. And this entire time, because you can never be too thin, you always hate yourself. And it just leads absolutely nowhere good. So that whole process can be subverted by a lot of self-work, by a lot of emotional work, by speaking to people, by really letting your thoughts be heard, and sort of coming to an understanding of, look, like, at the end of the day, who is interested in being around me for my appearance? I'm going to attract great people at every level of appearance that I am. The modern world is an enormous place, and especially through social media, it doesn't matter what size you are, you're going to have people that like you one way or another. Like, I don't know if you need 10,000 boyfriends, right? But you just need one probably, and one girlfriend or one whatever. So it's okay to be any weight. People will still like you, especially for the valuable things about you, which have nothing to do with your weight, right? So you can be any weight you want on that front. And then what about health? Well, clearly don't be a weight that's unhealthy. And if you perform a sport, be a weight that's pretty close to optimal for the sport. And at the end of the day, the aesthetic stuff is something you can work on And you can be as aesthetically pleasing as you like to yourself. Just be rational about it, calm and deliberate instead of doing things on impulse. Because people love to be like, I got to get skinnier. That's good. Like, everyone's going to approve of that. And it turns out most people just don't care. And the people that do care don't care about you or how thin you are. They care that you're happy and healthy. And they know that you like your sport and they want you to succeed at your sport. So, like, there is no Cosmopolitan magazine video camera following you around everywhere. Girls are super obsessed a lot of times with how much they weigh. I've never seen a guy ask a girl how much he weighed with any interest whatsoever outside of the athletic context. Guys only care about how you look. And for this matter, girls that are into girls only care about how you look. And that's to them. And everyone has a different template of what they're looking for. So if you wanted to be 120 pounds forever and you felt like crap going down 120, your clothes are falling off, you see bones sticking out, you're like, when I get to 120 pounds, I'll have happiness. That is the biggest lie in the world. There's no guarantee of that whatsoever. So just do you, come to grips with how you want to look, be healthy about it. There's a huge range for healthy weight. So you can be thickalicious and you can be skinnylicious and everything in between. And then the sport, that's the easiest part because you just talk to your coach. And if it's a good coach, they'll go, look, you need to gain 10 pounds to be a really good powerlifter. And you're like, yes, I'm gaining. And if you're okay with that on if it checks the health box and it checks that you're okay with looking like that box, it's all gravy.
So we actually covered that with Maddie Rogers, and she backed that up because when we started working with her, she was trying to get down to the 63 class, and it wasn't good. And I didn't. It wasn't my part to tell her that, but her coach and her very smartly decided that it was much better to go up to the 69 kilo class. And it worked out a lot better.
Yeah, you can fight tooth and nail to get to a weight class that your bone structure is just not designed to be in optimally. And you can even she was amazing at 63. Like, she was a, national ranked everything.
Junior national. Yeah.
Right, exactly. She was better at a heavier weight class. And people always think oh, well, if I'm great at 63, I got to be even better in the 50s somewhere. That's just not true, right? There's no good reason to think that, but we all have our biases. And the funny thing is this, it sounds like I've just been ragging on females this entire time and all they just want to get skinny, which is statistically true on average. It's not true for remotely close to all females, but there's a bias there. With men, the bias is the other way around. You ask a guy how big he wants to be, he's like, at least 400, the bigger, the better.
Pounds.
Right. And they do this thing where it's people want to, people think we could have done another myth that people think smaller is always better. For a lot of guys, people think bigger is always better. The number of people that have stopped giving a crap as to how big I was is currently infinite as far as much height I've gained, and it's all just a personal journey and there's no good and bad in this thing. At the end of the day, there's nobody watching you, and social media is this big illusion and you can turn it off if you want, and how you want to be, however you want to be, as long as you're healthy, as long as you're okay with whatever sport performance you get yourself into. That whole aesthetics thing and how skinny you want to be, and is it always better to be skinnier? It's just not always better to be skinnier. And just one last little plea here is, you can think of, this is maybe resonate with some folks. It's that woman that, she's your husband's friend at work, his wife. You can go to dinner parties at their house every now and again and barbecues, and she's so lean and so thin, and she's so beautiful. And you're like, man, Marcy, God, she's just, how old is she? 48? What? She's immortal. How is she doing this? I wish I was her. Pause. You have no idea what her internal mental life is like. And it could be good. We're not here to fit shame or skinny shame. She could literally just be a rock star and she's just that thin and that's just who she is and she barely works for it, or she works hard and is totally cool. She could be on a hamster wheel of insanity in there. She could be abusing various drugs to get to that body weight. Folks, I'm not hopefully telling anyone things they don't already know. They could be a house of cards, binge dieter, up and down psychosis, yelling at the husband, throwing things at yourself. And you're like, I wish I was Marcy. And she would come up to you and be like, you don't wish you were me. Trust me. And you're like, but I have 20 more pounds on you. She's like, that's not all that matters. And you're like, oh my God. Right. But people, I think sometimes when we think about body weight, we all go back to middle school where they're like, oh my God, Stacy's so thin. I wish I could be here. You're not in middle school anymore. Stop trying to be other people. Do you as best as you can. And if that means you're a little thicker than a little thinner, that's so totally cool. You may be the person that's 20 pounds heavier than Marcy at that barbecue, but you're eating the chicken fingers that they made and the hot dogs, and you're playing with your kids because you have all this energy and you're loving life. And you notice wow, she's so beautiful. I noticed she's only drinking Diet Coke and she hasn't eaten anything. Well, that's the thing. She hasn't eaten anything in a week because that's how she stays that thin. She's miserable. She hates it, or she loves it and it's super awesome, or anything in between. So a lot of times people see these folks, and maybe not even in real life, but on Instagram, social media. A lot of times these people get super lean. They'll take pictures of themselves with their food, like cheeseburger cheat meal. Look at my abs. And did you get your abs doing that? Like, no, I get my abs abusing drugs and being psychotic. And now I took this one picture to make you think that I'm happy because my supplement sponsor wants me to sell supplements. Like, that's what it comes down to. Don't fall for the myth. Do you as best as you can. And really quick, hat tip here. If you want to learn more about this kind of stuff and the validity of the idea that you can have health at a bunch of different sizes, and potentially focusing on health behaviors is a little bit better than over perseverating. How much do I weigh? What's this number? Just be healthy and live really well, eat well, and train. RP coach Dr. Gabrielle Fondaro, vitamin PhD, on Instagram, has tons of writings about this, makes tons of videos, and she's the go-to gal for looking at the stuff from the other side of the coin, because there's a big other side of crazy Instagram nonsense that you could start to think everyone wants you to be as skinny as possible. And it's just not true.
Yeah, just don't get caught comparing yourself to others is really the main takeaway there, because you don't know their stories, man. And that's the thing. On social media, you're just getting the highlights anyways. And I mean, I'm not nearly as, I don't have as many good examples that you can of the, crazy Marcy over there. Marcy's husband might be, I want to be like Marcy. And Marcy's husband going, no.
Please, for the love of God, I'll trade with anyone. Get me out of my life.
Seriously, though, that Marcy example, I think that is like a painful part of so many women's lives, though.
For sure.
The endless comparison, to somebody else. Someone's better than you, with their weight or their whatever. And like, it's traumatic, I swear, for so many women.
Well, yeah, isn't that a big part of so Lori's been taking an online class. Isn't that a big part of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's all about, happiness and where happiness comes from, and just comparing to other people is
Can I guess?
Terrible. Can you guess what?
Where happiness comes from?
Please do.
Happiness comes from comparing yourself to other people so much that the self-hatred drives you to be the skinniest person in the world. And then when you achieve that, you instantly ascend to godlike Buddhist level of perfect happiness forever. Did I get it right?
Nailed it.
Thank you. I knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to spend every waking moment on Instagram following like 10,000.
Scroll. The faster you can scroll, the better.
And just make sure you feel really bad with everything that you see, and then just keep doing it.
Because you're not a good person yet. You don't deserve to feel good yet. How are you supposed to have this good life when you know deep down inside you never deserved it?
Yes, but once you lose a bunch of weight, you'll feel great.
At 135, you don't deserve any happiness. At 129, you're just walking on water.
That's right.
Can do no wrong.
All problems solved.
Yeah, that's how millionaire bachelors meet their wives. Like, excuse me, ma'am, how much do you weigh? She's like 129.9. He's like, sorry, that rounds up to 130. Next.
I would say true happiness is having a weight room in your living room, so you don't have
True happiness is a loaded barbell, brother.
Yeah, brother.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really interesting, man. Just kind of going down that rabbit hole of comparing yourself. And here's the thing: we're all guilty of it, though. Like, I know I am from time to time.
Of course.
Yeah. And there's no need to feel guilty. It's a thing that happens. Like we all want to eat junk food. We don't have to go around guilty about that. But you don't always stuff your face with junk food. And there's like psychological junk food that you can eat that they sell it at the same store. 7-Eleven sells actual junk food and Cosmo magazines. Like you can eat both and really overdo it and start to buy it in. And that's not a good idea. So I think mostly just, and the thing is like, it's all a spectrum of there's no wrong answers. So like, is there anything wrong with being a model? No. Is there anything wrong with being skinny? Absolutely not. But like, if it's causing you an immense amount of psychological pain to try to diet and change yourself to be skinny, just know that there's actually no light at the end of that rainbow. Can you imagine? Just pick some other completely arbitrary goal and insert it into yourself, like into your mind, and see if that makes any sense. Can you imagine like a society where being the number one handball player was everything, and everyone wanted to be the best handball player ever? And like you, Nick and Lori, got like to visiting this country, and they were like, "Hey, welcome to our hotel. Do you guys have a handball score ranking?" And you're like, "No, I don't know what that is." They're like, "Oh my God, how do you live your life?" And you're like, I don't know what handball is, and I honestly don't care. And they're like, "Well, you're awful at it. Doesn't that bother you?" Like, what? No, there are people, and I mean this, that look at their body weight, that are perfectly healthy, they're perfectly fit, they're perfectly great at sports. They look at their body weight as a number in that same way. Like they'll be like, so you weigh 132? You'll be like, yes. They'll be like, what do you think about that? Like, what do I think about a series of 3 numbers?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to think about it? I don't know. You tell me. And you're like, man, that actually is incredibly psychologically healthy. So I think, sometimes when we get caught up in trying to be skinny or trying to be super jacked or getting caught up in a number of body weights, you imagine aliens coming down to Earth and being like, hello. You're like, hello, alien. They're like, how much do you weigh? You're like, 200. Is that good? They're like, what do you mean good? And you're like, I don't know. Like, are you aliens impressed? They're like, the mass of a human does not impress us in any dimension. And you're like, right. I should have known that. I'm an idiot. Sorry. And that beep, 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 and they blow up the Earth. You knew that was coming. They weren't going to let us stick around for gone. Fired.
Oh man, Dr. Mike, always an adventure when we go down this.
Ends with aliens blowing up the Earth.
Ends with aliens blowing up stuff. But no, that was good because I think we tackled a lot of myths in that they all kind of tie together with the way we approach things a little bit when it comes to dieting because it all does interrelate. And I can't wait for that article to come out about the app. Because when is that going to come out? Do you think?
Don't you worry about when it comes out. Okay. It's currently in editing, so you got to ask our various other RP employees, cool. Carolyn, Sonia, Mel, maybe. Melissa Davis at RP always has her hands in everything. She is the. Once we make the RP mechanical octopus that swallows the Earth, it's probably going to be like Melissa Davis's face on it.
8 arms.
Get used to seeing it. She does jujitsu. That's a jujitsu animal. The octopus is a jujitsu mascot.
I haven't trained jujitsu in so long now, man.
That stinks.
Don't bring it up.
I hear you. Don't bring it up. It's a sore subject.
I have had more time to devote to other things, though.
That's right.
There we go. Always a positive, always a bright side. But that was good, man. So there's some myths there that we've tackled. I think people are really going to like that, especially that stuff about the super dieters. I find that particularly fascinating. But
there's more to say on those if we want another episode on super dieters later.
Oh, yeah.
We have a whole other article only looking at super dieters.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to dig into that and chat a little bit more about it and get into the data and find out what particular traits makes those people the most successful.
Yeah, we found that people named Nick Shaw way better than everyone else. People named Lori Shaw, they're like second tier group.
People like Mike Israetel, they're like,
I'm not even on there because I get excluded from the analysis for not being good enough.
Yikes.
Ew.
Oh boy. But no, that's good. Let's call that one a wrap for today because we're already at about an hour 10. So we'll get back and we'll tackle some other myths in a future episode. And let's make sure that we get some questions and maybe some other myths to tackle from folks online. We can get back at it.
We'll do more of these. More to come.
More Mythbusters.
Thanks, Dr. Mike. Stay tuned.
Thanks for having me on, folks. Again, I will continue to email you and call you and beg to be on here. And when you're charitable / don't have anyone else in the slot, think of me.
Deal.
There we go. Deal. For everyone tuning in, listening, thank you so much. We appreciate if you want to hop on, give us a review or something on iTunes or wherever you're listening to the podcast. We really do appreciate it. And, send Dr. Mike, myself, or Lori a Instagram message, although Mike doesn't check his direct messages. So I'm sure there's some interesting stuff in there.
Pandora's box.
Oh boy. I don't even want to know. But we appreciate it. We'll take some questions there on future podcasts and get after it. But again, thanks for tuning in. Until next time.
See you next time, guys.